I'm going to tell you a story about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton, later on in his life, when he was Warden of the Mint, Master of the Mint, was basically a public servant. He had what we would now call a desk job and worked very hard at it with the typical Isaac Newton fixation and single-mindedness. He came home each night tired, as anyone would, especially if you're an older guy, as he was. And one night he came home, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and found there a letter which was a challenge to solve a mathematical problem. Now, the history of this challenge very quickly is that it was made by one of the Bedoolies, and he had solved the problem, and it had taken him 6 to 9 months of brutal thinking, mathematical thinking, before he finally solved it, and he was extremely proud that he had solved it. A brute of a problem, and he had solved it. And he decided to issue a prize out of his very own money, decided to issue a prize, a challenge to other mathematicians. European mathematicians were very quiet. A couple thought that they had solved it, and that turned out to be wrong. And Bernoulli was quite annoyed that the English analyst, Isaac Newton, the English mathematician, Isaac Newton, had not responded. So he decided to challenge him personally and sent him a letter saying, here's the problem, have you got a solution? Now, bearing in mind that Newton received this at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, by the next morning, 12 hours later, by the next morning, he had solved it. According to Derek Whiteside, a mathematician, historian of mathematician, who was responsible for putting together all Isaac Newton's mathematical papers, the fact that it took him 12 hours to solve this problem is a statement about how rusty Newton had become in his old age and as a public servant. A problem solved by Newton in hours that had taken Bernoulli, the inventor of the problem, months to solve. Now, I don't care how history regards Isaac Newton in the eyes of people like Helmut. I don't care that Isaac Newton turns out to have made some errors in judgment. That's the lot of the pioneer. But I think humanity should realise that in Isaac Newton they had an extraordinary human being that dabbled in concepts that no one else had ever done before, and brought to bear an intelligence and a perception and a skill in analysis that has not been seen before and has not been seen since.
Newton was for a start an obnoxious person. Not exactly what you would imagine a scientist to be, who looks at life in a detached manner. He was proud of himself, he was self-absorbed. He tolerated no opposing opinion. When Ole Römer came to him in 1674 and said, Mr. Newton, I have calculated the speed of light. It is not infinite, it is finite. Newton's reply was, I am Newton. Who are you? Get out of here. Now this tells you what kind of person Isaac Newton really was. If he said so, then it is so. The problem is not, as the previous speaker indicated, that Newton was a great man in his day. I really admit that. People were so ignorant, so stupid in the 17th century that anything anyone put forward and called it science, if Mr. Newton says so, then it is so. Quote the American writer Frank Close, without doubt, Leibniz's calculus is a hell of a lot better than Newton's, and it is the one we use today. An American scientist, okay, is not exactly a British sycophant. But there are others. There's John Griffin, historian of science, professor of history of science of Oxford University. And he has this to say, without doubt, Newton was a nasty piece of work. And he's right. Because someone who is so full of himself that he thinks nobody else is worth licking his boots what sort of person is it? Now, the speaker mentioned one or two issues, but that's not what Newton was wrong. He was wrong on half a dozen or more. He said light is corpuscular. Light is what? Light has matter. If it has body, it has matter. In 2014, no physicist in the world can tell you what the mass of a photon is. Every physicist says light is massless. Whereas Newton, with his corpuscular theory of light. Light, in his opinion, was hard, impenetrable, nasty. Now the word nasty already tells you how he went wrong. And always think, since we have limited time, besides the fixed stars that were mentioned, speed of light infinite. Wrong. Absolute space, absolute time. Where did he get that crap from? It broke his own lifelong motto. Hypothesis non bingo. I do not frame hypotheses unless they are supported by phenomena and evidence. Absolute space, it was a metaphysical construct. Absolute time, the same. Keeping space and time apart instead of putting them together as Einstein did, the greater genius. Not only that, there were other mistakes that Newton made. Hosts of them, too short a time, but plenty of other mistakes that subsequently were modified, overthrown by Einstein, and further overthrown by quantum physics. Quantum physics virtually demolished Newton's ideas completely, but they also were to the chagrin of Einstein, because Einstein was brought up and brainwashed with Newtonian crap. He couldn't help himself. At high school, at the Polytech in Zurich, which was for engineers, not really for physicists, but that's the best he could do. Einstein was indoctrinated or brainwashed with Newtonian physics, which accounted for the fact that Einstein, the young man, immediately cleared the ether superfluous. 1907, 1909, two statements are, by historians pointed out, where he explained, Einstein, that the ether is superfluous. On the other hand, by 1920, at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, he changed his mind. Suddenly, Einstein would say 12 years later or 11, the ether is necessarily a concept to be dismissed. This shows from the viewpoint of neuroscience how people get indoctrinated with crap. And that is my attack. Not because Newton was a great man or not so great a man. The crap is still taught in high school. And no high school teacher that I've ever heard of has the guts to step forward to a year 11 or 12 student and say, if you continue studying, you will learn that everything Newton said is wrong. Not even F equals m times a, his second law of mechanics. Even that is fundamentally flawed. I leave it at that. Thank you.
I'm going to finish my little story about the mathematical challenge. When Newton replied, he replied in writing and replied anonymously. And Bernoulli, when he'd opened the envelope and saw the problem had been solved, it was unsigned, but he said, I know who wrote this. I can tell the lion by his claw. Okay? That's the respect that a European mathematician had for the English analyst Isaac Newton. Okay. Next, I want to point out to you how Newton approached a problem that was important at the time. This is Newton trying the celebrated phenomenon of colours. At that time, it was a matter of dispute as to whether the colours in the rainbow were produced by an interaction with the water. In other words, the water droplets that are producing the rainbow, or the prisms that are breaking the light up into colours, whether the glass was adding the colour, whether the water droplets were adding the colour to the light, or whether the colours were inherent in the light, and that all the glass was doing and all the water drops were doing was splitting the light up into its colours. Now, that second idea was not popular and was not held by very many people. Newton experimentally, on his own, experimenting in his little room with the window and the hole in the blind, was able, by making observations on prisms, and lenses and mirrors, and making measurements on the width of the different colours in the spectrum, was able to show that it's the colours that were already existing in the light from the sun. That for once and for all, he proved that it's not the addition of colour by glass or water drops. It's the glass or the raindrops split the light into the colours that were already there. And further, no, I'm going to take an extra 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And further showed how refraction and reflection produced the colours of the rainbow in water droplets, and refraction, how it produces the colours in glass prisms. That's a first. That's experimenting. That's something that had never been done in the history of humanity.
That in the archives they found evidence that Robert Graustes, who lived in the 13th century, published a book called Optics, the same thing that was plagiarized by Newton in 1704. Optics. And what did he show in optics? That light is deflected, reflected, and diffracted. In other words, Newton, once again, whether he knew about Graustes or not, if he didn't know about Graustes, he did his usual I am Newton. I discovered that. I calculated that. Nobody else knew it, only I. If he knew about Robert Graustes, then it's basically plagiarism again. As he plagiarized so many ideas, like the inverse square law, I've mentioned before, that archives show and the records show Robert Hooke in 1665 informed the Royal Society and specifically Mr. Newton that the force falls off reciprocal to its distance. In other words, an inverse square law. Newton made notes, stole it, and didn't publish it for 19 years. And in the case of Robert Hooke and publishing Optics, because so much of light was suggested by Hooke, Newton sat on it till 1704. The year after Robert Hooke died, Newton published. Now that's the kind of person Newton was. Disgusting, nothing else. Thank you.